product, like this is a really good opportunity to provide feedback and ask questions that our proposers can use to inform their full proposals. So please take advantage of that opportunity and the fact that we're all coming from different backgrounds here and there's no such thing as a stupid question, and it's an opportunity for us to learn about what other folks do in other disciplines and in other jurisdictions. So I would love to see some engagement from this group. We are going to get started with Laura Hall, the public alerts, usability, branding, rebranding, and promotion concept.
Hey, this is Alex. Real quick, Can I just bump in real quick? I got to jump off at 1:30, but this is going to be my last program committee meeting, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for all your support and your friendship and camaraderie, all the knowledge and expertise that you've shared with me, and that we were able to, all the projects we were able to complete for the region. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone. I wish everybody well. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. You've been great.
Alex, I'm so glad you spoke up. Yeah, and Alex, you contributed a lot to the RDPO in your time at TriMet, and we know you're still going to stick around and we'll still get to see you from time to time, but we really appreciate all the work that you've done for our region. Okay, Laura, go ahead and get started. Thanks.
Hey, thanks everyone. So I'm the chair of the Disaster Messaging Task Force, and we have in the last year come up with a pretty robust work plan for our task force / work group. And public alerts improvements is a main theme. There are other themes that I'm happy to talk about at another time. And I'd actually like to come back to the program committee at some point to do a presentation on our work plan. But right now, I'll focus on publicalerts.org. We were approved to do an accessibility audit, which will begin in the next couple of months. But another thing that we need to do to make sure that this website is meeting the needs of all of our community members is to do a usability study. So we created this website as a task force, but we've never gotten any feedback from the public about whether or not the content or the layout meets their needs. So the goal of this, the first goal is to do a usability study, and that could potentially look different depending on how much money we have available. So it could be more cost effective to do an online survey. Of course, then we struggle to get it to the right people, but it's still possible. There are as we go up in price, you get more effective usability studies. So for example, we could do focus groups, and that's sort of the gold standard of usability testing. But either way, we want to craft a plan to make sure that it's meeting everyone's needs. And we have some ideas for how to increase participation and for how to reach members of our community who are not normally represented in this type of questioning. The second step of this project would be to do a rebranding effort. Right now we have our branding says public alerts, but it does not tell people that public alerts is a website full of information about alerts, but as well as hazard information and preparedness information and ways to engage in preparedness efforts. So we need to do some amount of rebranding, at the minimum, change the logo to say .org, but hopefully also create some promotional materials to be used both on social media and during in-person outreach work. And then finally, we hope to do a small scale web campaign to promote publicalerts.org. Eventually, we want to do a larger promotion campaign, but for now, we want to at least pilot it with an online campaign. And that's it, and I'll leave time for questions.
Questions for Laura and her team? Laura, I'd like to know a little bit more about language accessibility and what kinds of things you are going to try to suss out in this assessment, or what kind of inklings you think you might have and find out more about.
Well, we have done some basic accessibility audits of the website using free tools. And one of them tests for readability, so plain English readability. And that we feel pretty good about, but again, we've never tested it with people. So in terms of non-English language access, We're currently using Google Translate, and that is, I think most people know by now, not a perfect tool. But what we do know about its flaws are that it tends to be more inaccurate when you have lots of jargon and complex verbiage, which we believe our site does not. But I ordered this to have the accessibility audit come before the usability testing for that reason. We want to test accessibility before asking people for feedback. And we are keeping a close eye on the evolution of Google Translate, which is all looking very positive right now. And so I'm in touch with Portland's BTS to manage that. And we are hoping not to have to do manual translation of the entire site, but if that's what it takes to provide language access, then we will evaluate that.
Laura, how would this scope just be on the website, or would it be on any use of public alerts like WIAs and things like that?
The accessibility audit that we're about to do is for both. So it would be the Multnomah County Everbridge sign up portal. And then it would be publicalerts.org. This usability study is just for publicalerts.org. There, at the end of the day, there's only so much we can do to influence Everbridge, but we believe that the accessibility audit will provide us with a lot of information that we need.
And are you providing that information to the state as they go into their contract right now they have an RFP open, I think, something like that for statewide alert and warning?
I hope to have the results of our accessibility audit in time for it to be useful for them, but I have let them know that we are planning it.
Awesome. Any other questions for Laura?
I have a question, actually just a request. When you send out the survey or the study, can you make sure that some water providers are included in that? Because we use it for our drinking water advisory tool. Public Alerts houses that tool for us, and everybody's website, everybody's jurisdiction, water providers jurisdictions have that link on the website, and it's all connected. And I would love to be part of that usability study because I feel it's not very usable.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
just don't forget some of the water providers that use that system also.
Yeah, and Bonnie Cushman's on our task force.
Perfect.
So
She'll make sure that we get
yeah.
that.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Anything else for Laura? Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much, Laura. And we're going to move right along. So the next one is for implementing public engagement lessons learned, and that's Jamie Smealand and Pilar Montejo. Are you guys, let's see, are you guys both here? Hello, welcome.
Yes, we are. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Pilar Montejo, and from Multnomah County Emergency Management. This concept is implementation of community engagement lessons. The purpose is to operationalize lessons learned and create new and improved ways of communicating with the public prior, during, and after disasters. We will be gaining in-depth assessments from the emergency lessons learned and from the research previously done. And this is our opportunity to implement those and have a more community-based process. And we will have more materials such as multilingual workshops, handouts, case studies, training materials that will be informed by the community. This project will benefit from relationships developed and strengthening up to this point or by that time. And we will engage 5 counties: Multnomah, Washington, Clackamas, Clark, and Columbia counties, and we will work collaborative with different stakeholders, the RDPO work groups, the community-based organization, specifically Black, Indigenous, community of color, immigrants, and refugees, and people with access and functional needs. And our input will be the lessons learned, tools, materials, and best practices, and we will definitely benefit from an improved coordination, reduce duplication of work among partners, and increase effectiveness. Jamie?
Thank you, Pilar. And we have a number of deliverables that we've listed in the grant application, but we want to make sure that when the time comes for this grant that we are flexible enough to be able to prioritize what community members have identified as the most important and to adapt those deliverables as needed. So some of the deliverables you may have seen in the grant application were, multi-phase curriculum and training materials, handouts, things that could be implemented in peer-to-peer training programs. We've also talked about having a disaster 101 video that could be in multiple languages and that could be followed up upon with culturally specific materials, facilitator guides. But one of the things that we know, no matter what we prioritize in terms of deliverables, we want to make sure that our implementation strategy is in alignment with community members' needs. So we want to make sure to appropriately compensate CBOs and community members. We want to make sure that there is robust collaboration across cultural communities, across the counties with the other RDPO work groups. We want to make sure that the materials are co-created and culturally informed, and that in this project, we have the opportunity to pilot materials, to get feedback, make those adjustments, and then have community members try them out again so that they will be really robust and useful. And again, to have subject matter experts be from the community as often as possible, to be hired from within the community. So in some of our kind of big picture look with our communications materials, we're going to have this lessons learned time to gather research and data about what we've learned. We'll have a series of multilingual workshops, which will be specific and also provide more information around emergency alerts. And then throughout that, we're going to learn about other items that are needed, and this would provide us with the opportunity to really implement those again and to have a collaborative process with community members in design and piloting and implementing. And that's it. We'll take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Pilar and Jamie? I sure hope we do. We've all been doing public engagement in our EOCs throughout COVID. All right, well, thank you so much, Pilar and Jamie, for the presentation. Look forward to hearing more about this down the road.
Could I jump in with a quick question? Sorry.
Absolutely, go ahead.
This is Joe from Metro, working on the Social Vulnerability Tools project. We're doing some community engagement as well. I'm just curious if you've started sort of thinking about who you're going to reach out to, or if it's still pretty early in your process.
So yes, we know that we're going to be working with cultural community-based organizations, and we know that the current community-based organizations that are working with the response for COVID, they are doing a lot of stuff, but we know that just in Multnomah County area, there are 400 CBOs that could be doing that. So from the previous grants or previous projects, we are gonna get some of those names that could help us in this implementation. Hopefully we can go through the previous projects with this and this one with the same grants, but we may vary, but we don't have specific names at the time. We will learn from the lessons learned. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. And I would just say, if you want to brainstorm or have a meeting and collaborate together, I'd be interested in that.
Totally, love it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. One other piece I'll add is that we had identified wanting to make sure that we're working with youth-centered groups or organizations to make sure that we are meeting the needs of various audiences across age levels. We've also received some input to make sure that we're reaching out to community members with disabilities. So those are two additional groups that have been identified just as we've been brainstorming around this project.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, as this moves forward, I think Portland ECC is definitely interested in contributing, and we have some connections to the groups you just mentioned as well.
And Katie, this is Mike Myers. I don't know if I know I'm presenting later. I don't know if it's okay for me to talk at this meeting.
Absolutely. Everyone here is encouraged to engage.
Well, there's a lot of opportunity. It sounds like some cross-pollination on all these community-based organization products that we're seeing. I think we'll see today. I mean, even the one that I'm going to present later, I think there's an opportunity for us to maybe collaborate together and do a little more. So I'd be open to having that discussion too, if that's in the interest of the group. I just see a lot of great opportunity, and this is a really interesting and well thought out project.
I would agree with that too.
Good. And this is why it's nice to have folks from different concepts come and see each other's proposals too, and they can see, oh, that's like mine, we should talk. So that's really awesome. It's definitely not just the program committee members who are encouraged to engage. It's an opportunity for everybody to cross-pollinate. Okay, well, let's move right along. We're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about some Titan Fusion projects, and we have Shannon Marheim.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, Shannon. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we have two sets of slides. I'm just going to roll with the first one, and then if you want to do the Q&A, that's great, and then roll in the next one in Q&A. And then happy to do a wrap-up Q&A too if it brings more questions from the group. So our first proposal is, again, requesting funding for the UASI Criminal Intelligence Analyst position. This is a dedicated Intel Analyst position. If you can advance the slide for me, thank you very much. This position, I tried to note some of the duties that come out of this position because it is a unique spot. Being in the Oregon Titan Fusion Center, there's a lot going on the law enforcement side that isn't necessarily represented or delivered well to the FOUO group. So that's something I want to make sure that we accomplish here today. So this position works on daily alerts, missing persons, terror screening hits, things that are specific to the UASI area. So her focus is on those events that happen in the Portland metro area. She focuses on situational awareness bulletins, officer safety bulletins, the DHS data call. I think many of you have probably had a great opportunity these last couple of years. You've definitely been canvassed with emails on DHS and their special events data calls. These are giving us an opportunity not only to represent the state of Oregon and let DHS understand those events that we have going on, but they have a unique component in the UASI area because they do lend to our MSA risk score. So that's something that's very beneficial to all of us. Additionally, this position works on sector-specific threat briefs. So you guys might recall that whole election thing that happened recently. There was an election. That is a key threat consideration sector for the Department of Homeland Security, and it's certainly key as a state of Oregon, as an UASI area. So those type of sector-specific activities that happen during an annual period, this position focuses on. So obviously in 2020, not only did we have elections, we had some more activities going on in the Portland area that impacted communications, K through 12 schools with COVID and pandemic, health and hospitals. So we had a lot of focus on sector-specific threat briefs this year. Additionally, this position would help support EOC or ECC activities as needed. Pop to the next one for me. Thank you. And then additionally, part of our duty in the Oregon Titan Fusion Center is to support local law enforcement. And this position does that by supporting casework. When I say casework, tactical casework, this is a crime's been committed, a law enforcement agency is needing a workup on that particular criminal. They're needing charts that show location, crime, those kind of things. This is analytical work to support a criminal case. So those are the type of things that this analyst does as well. And then additionally, threat prevention support, that is in line with our discussion on the DHS data call, working on critical infrastructure, working community outreach, and then THIRA input. So I'm trying to be brief because I envision a lot of questions. Any questions on that one, or do you want me to move right into the next one?
I'm open to, yeah, folks have questions now. Go ahead.
Katie, this is Mike Myers again. So can we kind of go over the ECC support and how that might look with local law enforcement, how you might integrate with them? I assume this is on big events, or are we talking about, we have ongoing nightly events here in Portland, the city of Portland, so I can't speak for everybody else, but can you kind of talk about how that, how you might interact in that setting?
Sure, happy to. It would be basically dictated by the agencies themselves, their need. So we have a large, usually we try to focus on larger events because it's only one person. And in nightly events, we wouldn't be able to support that with one dedicated person for the UASI area, but I understand your question. And it doesn't have to be a statewide thing, right? It doesn't have to impact the entire state. It has to impact the UASI area. So this analyst is truly dedicated to you. This position is to support efforts that go on. She's bid up in PBIM's EOC. I would like to see our position more over at PBIM's EOC as well as PPB's. I definitely want to see that happen. This position engages with the state ECC. So kind of in and out depending on what the need is. I think we have an opportunity to have more consequence management discussions on the Fusion side, where we are focused on law enforcement. We have a mission specific to Department of Homeland Security in this particular grant, but I think we have an opportunity to show more consequence management efforts. So we're completely open to that discussion, Mike.
Thanks for that, Shannon.
Of course.
All right, let's move right along to the next thing you want to bring up.
Okay. So I have to say it before I get started. I apologize for the typo on the slide. I caught it after I sent it to Beth, bless her heart, and she was so kind to put these in last minute for me. So my analyst didn't do this. Please know that they would never make a mistake like reversing the T and a Y. That was all me. Okay, that little alibi. This proposal is for the UASI Cybersecurity Intelligence Analyst position. Last year was the first year that we came to this group and asked for this position with the idea that this would help us kick off cybercrimes discussions, cybersecurity discussions, and look at it as almost a test site for the entire state. We haven't had an opportunity to do that just yet, as you all know. We haven't, nothing's been released yet from the state to get us moving on that, but we're encouraged that it's coming our way, and we still see a need for it. So I'm going to go into the duties and responsibilities that we see this position doing, understanding that this doesn't exist yet. Okay, well, the position doesn't exist, the work does. So for the cybersecurity intelligence analyst, this position, would focus on FBI cybercrimes, MS-ISAC cyber alerts, daily alerts for criminal activity. It would focus on special events, the cybersecurity component of a special event, DHS data calls, cyber IT sector specific events, and then the support to the MSA risk that includes cyber security threats. So 2020 has definitely taught us that cybersecurity, we've known it wasn't a sidebar, but it definitely this year has been very prominent with the use of cyber threats, social media, those kind of agendas. We've seen that a lot, and we have a need for someone to be focused on just cyber, and definitely in the UASI area. So that would be this position. The other piece would be threat briefs, and then potentially, back to Mike's question, EOC and ECC participation if it's a lead cyber event. We can go to the next one. Mix up my slides here. Okay. Additionally, suspicious activity reporting, which is a key component of the Fusion Center. The cybercrime suspicious activity group is growing by leaps and bounds. And one of the challenges we have is we have great partners in the state that work on cybercrimes, that work on cyber threat, but we don't have one unified approach to trending that cybercrime, to creating techniques, tactics, and procedures, TTPs that we send out to make other people aware of what could be coming their way. So one of the one of the goals, mission sets of the Fusion Center, including the support to UASI, is to make sure that we're able to take the lessons learned and get them out to the people that matter. So again, our focus being on law enforcement is lovely, but we also need to be able to support consequence management efforts, hopefully in mitigation of those threats in the future. So that's one piece as well. And then additionally, thyra input for the UASI group and critical infrastructure risk assessments in partnership with USDHS CISA. I will happily answer questions.
Open for questions.
Okay, it's Mike again. So one of the critical infrastructure risk and threat assessments that just the city of Portland has been talking about in the past is the Justice Center downtown. Its unique location down there with its with the jail and central command located in what is typically a area of protest, and it's been just it's just a bad area to host that kind of infrastructure. Are those some of the risk and threat assessment analysis that your team would do on that critical infrastructure, on where we keep jail population and where command centers are, based on regular occurring civil unrest, those kinds of things?
Those are locations that we absolutely can do risk assessments on. Really the guiding light for us isn't necessarily event driven, although special events, current events are going to drive obviously where we focus our resources. Really, we have to be asked by the owner operator of those particular facilities to say, hey, we'd like you to come in and take a look and do a risk vulnerability assessment. And so we can do assessment on the facility, look at the vulnerabilities, work with Department of Homeland Security to make sure that we're considering all the interdependencies that happen with the building. So those things can absolutely happen. The limitation we have is being invited by the owner operator because it's their assessment. Once we complete it, we don't share it with the world. It belongs to the owner operator. They handle that assessment from that point forward. And then two, resources, right? Being able to get there and get it done and schedule with some partners.
Thank you.
Of course.
Are there any other questions for Shannon?
Shannon, this is Beth. Can you hear me? Hi.
Yes.
Hey, can you describe or quantify the cybersecurity threats that have happened across the region in the last year or so? I mean, how prevalent is this threat?
Sure. Without going to a full brief, of course, in my opinion, and based on the information coming into the Fusion Center and from our partner agencies in that sector, it's very prevalent. We've had multiple malware attacks in the state of Oregon. I'm sure many of you have seen the news articles that have happened to healthcare facilities, data centers alike, where they've been hit by these actors. These are largely things that if we had all the resources in the world, right, as a team, we could help prevent by encouraging patching, sharing, again, the techniques, tactics, and TTPs with owner operators. A lot of our sector specific owner operators, like healthcare, like government facilities for state and local, especially that don't have a dedicated cybersecurity person, they're scrambling. So there's a big need for this. And my vision for trending what we've seen, if it continues on the trend it's on, that's my caveat, we're going to see more.
Thank you.
Yeah, really good. Thank you, Shannon. Anything else for anybody? Okay, appreciate the briefings. And yeah, from what I've heard, the cybersecurity threat is definitely out there, and we're kind of lucky that we've been able to get by so far without any impacts.
Agreed. Thank you all for letting me present. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, our next presenter is Chris Voss for planning and training and exercising. But I'm looking on the.
So Chris is in a meeting up. So if we're a little bit ahead of schedule, not quite have joined us yet.
Great. We're actually, about 20-25 minutes ahead of schedule, which means we need more questions and engagement from folks. Again, this is a really good opportunity. It's not supposed to be a threatening environment, like we're criticizing someone's ideas. It's just so we can find out more about what these projects are. And the point of being on the program committee is to help us build that strength and cross knowledge, so it doesn't matter if you're not an expert in the field. In fact, that's why you're here, is so we can cross-pollinate and build more of that institutional knowledge.
So maybe we could hear from Citizen Corps while we.
Yeah, let's just skip over. We'll come back to Chris's. We'll go to Renata for Citizen Corps.
Hey there, sorry, just getting situated. All right, so Citizen Corps this year, our grant focuses a lot on the lessons that we've learned from responding to COVID and also from the fires that we had recently. We found a lot of success working with community partners in ways that we hadn't before. And so our grant builds off of that, our request. So as you've seen before, the Citizen Corps requests can look a little sporadic, but the root of all of it is supporting these programs that help our community responders and our community volunteer programs. So one of the key requests in this grant is initiative by Portland to create a COAD, and part of that is they want to bring on some temporary help for that. Also, we want to strengthen those volunteer programs that have been proven through the fire response and through the COVID response, such as the MRC, who've been just a powerhouse in responding, and then also CERT. An additional part of that is that we've noticed that our existing ways of training are insufficient. So if we're all distancing, we're all at home, we can't have in-person classes, and we don't have a platform set up to be able to deliver that training. And so we've noticed that FEMA has come up with an online platform for CERT. Several jurisdictions have explored that, and they find that it might be inadequate for what we're looking for. Sorry, my son's here trying to say hello. So we want to get a springboard off of what's already out there. So you'll see in our grant request is funds for a learning management system and some sort of a virtual training platform, starting with CERT, but absolutely expanding. And this would also allow for equity for populations who don't speak English, which is the primary language we deliver CERT in. So we would be able to deliver training in a more flexible schedule and more accessible manner. Also, let me see. Also, we have some new jurisdictions that are requesting funding. You recently probably heard about banks getting some reallocation funds to start a CERT program. And so they've requested funds under this grant to continue expanding that program, but in a moderate way as they're getting their feet under them for this program. Also, we have some training requests that will include benefits to the whole region. Clackamas County wants to hold a CERT summit, of course, depending on distancing and how things go with COVID, but they've accounted for contingencies in their plan. Also translations of materials, and then FEMA's I Am Ready course, Vancouver's had a lot of success with that. So CRESA has requested funds to deliver I Am Ready training as well. So really a big push to decrease barriers to training, increase accessibility, get materials more accessible. So that was a very quick summary of a very varied program. I'm absolutely open to suggestions, critiques. I'd like my grant application to be as good as it can be. Thanks, everyone.
We have questions around Citizen Corps.
Hey, Renata, this is Beth. How many CERTs are there in the region? How many individual programs are there?
I'm gonna have to count those. So each county has at least one. Washington County has several. So I could say 8 to 10 off the top of my head, but I'd have to do an in-depth assessment, because Clackamas County, the way it's organized is through their fire department. Sorry, their fire structure. So I'm not sure how that's broken up in Clackamas County. So I can get that number for you if that's important to the group.
And what's your sense of the number of volunteers that are engaged in Citizen Corps activities? Just, I get that that's off the top of your head, but what's your impression?
Well, I know with Portland alone, there's like 1,000 plus. Beaverton, we have about 200. So several thousand. And I mean, you talk about the wait list too. Portland has had a huge wait list for their CERT class. So getting an online platform would open that up to a lot more people than in-person training.
Thanks. That's helpful. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't have more exact numbers, but I can research those.
If I could just punctuate that, Renata.
Oh, thanks,
Glenn.
Glenn.
Yeah, so active in Portland, we have approximately 2,100, and in the queue for training are about 1,700.
That's just Portland itself.
Mhm.
Correct.
Thank you.
Anything else for Renata?
I have a question, if I may. And I don't know how much you can respond to Portland's element, but maybe Glenn can. This half-time staff to build up the end-to-end program. So how will that actually be sustained then afterwards? Is that going to be built into existing staff's responsibilities? I don't know if Glenn or someone can.
Yeah, Glenn, can you pick that one up?
Do you have
And if not, we can get back.
a take on that one? No problem if you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's a plan yet for the sustainability. My understanding is we want to see success and then determine whether it's worth sustaining. So this isn't, my understanding is that it's not a permanent ask at this point to see how it goes and really pilot it. Does that sort of answer the question?
Yeah, I'd say that to make the concept stronger would be to talk about how this is going to be sustained. And then just because we have so many projects that are CBO based, again, sort of this concept of maybe it could somehow coordinate with other groups that are working on CBO based projects.
Denise, I concur, and I'd be glad to even offer up front to start that collaboration if that's the interest of the group. I can just see too many opportunities here to be stronger together.
Mm-hmm. And last but not least, I know that the names of things differ across the region. I do see a trend, maybe it's just in Portland, but just curious where Neighborhood Watch may be going, especially since it has negative connotations, especially in our communities of color. So just to note that, I mean, not that you have to change that, but just to note that that is something that maybe sticks out for some in an era when we're trying to sort of transition from that. Thank you.
We have about another minute for questions.
And Beth, remind me if everybody on the program committee got a link to the Google Drive that I know that the evaluation committee got. So do they have access to the actual PDFs? I think you sent that out.
Yes.
Yeah, so everybody just, as we go through each of these, if you're looking at the proposal concept while the person's talking, that can be helpful information to generate discussion. Okay. Thank you, Renata. The next person we have, do we have Laura Hansen for emergency transportation routes? Yes. Laura Hansen, are you there?
I am here. 1 second. Sorry, I'm having malfunctions just getting unmuted and my video. Okay. Hi, everybody. Okay. So emergency transportation routes, those of you who've been engaged with, committees over the last couple of years have heard about the current phase of the project. We are most of the way through that current first phase. I've been managing that project together with Kim Ellis at Metro. She's the regional transportation planner. So, and we convened a multidisciplinary working group in this first phase that has representation from emergency management, from public works, from transit, from the ports, to really make sure that we're addressing this both from like the emergency management standpoint and also from the transportation planning standpoint. And we've really leaned heavily on Metro to engage with all the various transportation planning groups around the region. So that's going really well, and we're approaching finalization of this update. And in that process, recognize that there are a few things we still need to do to follow on this work. So we've proposed a phase 2, which would really, so just to give you the highlight summaries, for those who maybe have looked at the concept, the request is for $250,000. We expect the work to take between 18 and 20 months. And we'll be finishing this first phase by May of 2021. So that will give us, pretty decent time frame to do a transition and start this phase 2. So what we would be looking to do is really, phase 1 in essence brought us up to date in terms of potential routes for regional use since the last update was done in 2006. So what we've done with this update in phase 1 is really add a lot of routes to the designation of regional ETR. And that's because of, investments and infrastructure that have happened, and also a better understanding of the seismic risks that we have based on the work we did with Dogami. So we have now a more robust set of regional ETRs. What we want to do next is develop a tiering methodology and an evaluation framework that will use the outcomes of this first phase and follow kind of the guidance that ODOT did with their seismic lifeline routes. So ODOT, if anyone's familiar with their routes, they have a tier 1, 2, and 3. And that's really tied to the time frame that they anticipate to restore functionality on the routes. So because we have so many routes now in our region, we feel that would also be a useful exercise for us to do and make sure we're really clear about the prioritization of that long list of routes so that people understand how they would be, how soon certain routes might become available, and how, and I think also to use that for thinking around investments for infrastructure as well. So we also stopped short in this first phase around developing guidelines and agreements for operationalizing the routes. That's because RDPO and Metro, we don't own any of these facilities. So there is a process that needs to happen with the owners, the counties, the cities. In some instances, TriMet owns some facilities, to really make sure we're clear and have agreement around the region about what this means in practice and how the local jurisdictions would apply this in an incident. And we saw this come up even with the wildfire situation this year. We were contacted by folks wanting to understand how to use the ETRs for evacuation purposes. And, so we pushed them back over to the Clackamas EOC and the transportation folks in Clackamas County to determine that. But I think we need to really highlighted how we need to clarify for stakeholders what the purpose of the ETRs is, and then how that feeds into decision-making during an incident. And then we also would be interested to develop a communications toolkit. A large part of phase 1, this is a really heavy lift across a lot of disciplines and multiple organizations just to do the communications part of the project. So we actually want to formalize that in this next phase and make sure we give adequate resource to the effort to develop a toolkit, make sure we have robust stakeholder engagement that supports the development of these tiered routes, the guidelines that we want to establish, and any type of formalized agreement that might result. With the prior ETRs that are in place, that are currently in place right now, there was an MOU developed back in 2006. The Washington Department of Transportation signed, ODOT signed, and other partners in the region. We haven't prescribed whether this would be an MOU, but something, if we want some kind of more formalized arrangement once the prioritization, we recommend that we do. We don't know if it'll be an MOU or some other format, but we want to make sure we have adequate time and resource built in for that, because that's a time-intensive process with a lot of stakeholder outreach. So that's the summary, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
Laura, I'll kick it off. I just wanted to know how it went with scoping this phase, and if you've found kind of any lessons learned from previous scoping and rescoping and reallocation, how we've gone through several rounds with previous, not only this project, but other similar planning projects. We tend to kind of under budget, I would say, or I'm not sure how, you would know better than I would.
Yeah.
Have you kind of found that you've been able to apply those lessons learned to this particular concept?
Yes, definitely. And I think that's a really helpful point to highlight. So when we originally scoped phase one, we actually scoped it at just over $200,000. But because at the time, we hoped that some of the partners in the region, ODOT, Metro, TriMet even, might have some money to chip in. We were really trying to leverage the RDPO investment and get partners to put money forward. So we only partially funded it with RDPO funds originally. And in the end, what needed to happen is that we actually needed funds to support Metro's planners' time, and there was no funding available through other sources. So we ended up coming back to fully fund it through the RDPO. So that's one big lesson learned, is that we need to just fully fund whatever we're proposing to do. And that's what we've done this time around, especially in light of the budget situation that everyone's facing due to COVID. We want to just make sure that we ask for what's needed in this first go and don't need to come back to revise that. I will say also that it's just been, often what drives so much of the cost is really the stakeholder engagement process, taking so much time and effort. And this project in specific is really time intensive on that front because of how many committees, within the RDPO itself we have that need to weigh in. And so we've done a lot of attendance at work group meetings and presentations throughout. And then at the same time, Metro's own transportation planning process has a similar number of groups and meetings that we've attended. So it's just a really, really time intensive thing to do this type of regional coordinated planning. So we've accounted for all of that. Coming off of phase one, I think we have a much better understanding of those demands and we're able to account for that.
We're at
Great.
time.
Thank you. I did want to see if we are, I already asked my question. Does anybody else have a quick question?
I just would add a comment too. They've done such a great job in a very difficult situation too, in which you're compiling a lot of data from around the region and it doesn't always match. And so there's time wasted trying to crunch the numbers. We have Joe Gordon on the line here today too from Metro, and he wasn't necessarily involved in this, but there's just a lot of work. And so we're learning, and this project I think gave us just that another set of lessons.
Thank you. So thanks, Laura. I appreciate your presentation. And since we're running, a half hour ahead of schedule, we didn't schedule any breaks because it looked like it was gonna, the way we had lined it up, we might not have time for it. I would propose we take a 5-minute break and come back at 2:05. Just give ourselves a chance to take a bio break or answer a quick email and come back to this. And again, I encourage folks to use some time to kind of think about these proposals and be engaged on the discussion. If that sounds good to you, Beth and Denise, I think we could take 5 minutes.
That sounds great. Thanks so much, Katie.
Thanks. We'll see you in 5 minutes, everybody.
Nancy, I see you just joined us. We're on a 5-minute break.
Of course.
That's an awesome time to enter the
I
meeting.
have perfect timing, don't I? Well, actually, I need one, so I'm going to be right back.
Great. Okie dokie. So we are getting back here. Appreciate the chance to take a quick break, and I had to look at some voicemails that have been coming in while I'm on this call. It's a long meeting, so that was helpful. All right. So the next person, we have Corey Makowitz from I think this is from the transportation group. This is the vehicle barriers. And do you have slides, or do you just?
There's 3 slides that should be part of the large deck.
Got it. Okay.
And I'm ready whenever.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone. So I am briefing on a joint submission between law enforcement work group and the public works work group. The actual submission went through the law enforcement work group. The product, I want to talk product, then I want to talk about use case, and I want to kind of talk about what you get for the money. The product, I want you to take a look at the pictures. We've got Archer 1200 barriers from Meridian Defense Group. The barriers are part of an anti-vehicle system. It can go on roads or sidewalks. The barriers can be kitted up into drop deck trailers that hold 8 barriers, and the barriers can be rapidly deployed. You see on the bottom left photo, there's a single individual with a hauler. The barriers have a couple wheels. The barriers weigh 700 pounds, but with a hauler can be easily moved into place, and once put into place, not easily moved. This system can be very rapidly deployed. The systems that a lot of the local jurisdictions are currently using are barriers, Jersey barriers that have to have special equipment come in and place these, and crews. If there's a law enforcement type activity, typically the public works folks would come in and put themselves in a somewhat dangerous situation. Whereas with a system like this, anybody, law enforcement could hook up, as long as they had a vehicle with a tow kit, deploy the barriers, drop the deck, and offload. The barriers are also able to be connected together with an arrestor kit, which are cables. So if an individual or somehow a barrier is going to be moved against the will of whoever put it in there, or if it's struck by a vehicle, it'll help hold the system together and provide extra power to the overall system. So I've mentioned Meridian Defense Group. They are, we're able to sole source them potentially based on their qualifications with the, I'll pull up here in a second, one of the safety qualifications, Safety Act qualifications that they have and they have alone, or this could potentially be put out to bid. But throughout the rest of this project, I'm working off a Meridian Defense Group quote. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in general, the purpose of the project is to prevent vehicle ramming attacks. So dialing back just several years, we've had the big vehicle ramming attacks. We had 2016 in Nice, France, 86 people were killed, mostly from the vehicle ramming, vehicle high speed through a crowd, also some gunfire. 2016 Berlin truck attack, shooting and ramming, 12 people killed. Barcelona, 16 killed, 152 injured, included ramming, stabbing, and bombings. And New York City, a little bit closer to home, 2017, truck that rammed cyclists and runners and killed 8. So we want to ensure that we're prepared regionally to best protect against that. You could see the effectiveness of the barriers in crash test videos if you would like to afterwards. The barrier itself, if the vehicle decides it's gonna run the barrier, there's legs, short legs that are raised up there on the back of the barrier, and there's the long legs on the front. As the vehicle rams the barrier, the back legs will pivot, will dig into the pavement or the surface, while the front legs will lift the vehicle in the air, and it stops it within a few feet very effectively. So Portland specifically, there's been talks about installing bollards around the city and things to help, better protect public gatherings and pedestrians. This could be easily moved around. We get called out for the Grand Floral Parade, Junior Parade, Starlight Parade. We put in place vehicles with basically dump trucks with gravel. Police vehicles get put in the way, and barriers that, they'll stop somebody who wants to stop. They're tri-bar barriers, like the type 3 barriers, but they're not going to stop a vehicle. So we also have the entertainment district where there's pedestrians, they've been drinking, and the police have a program where they shut that area down to traffic. We have the tree lighting ceremony where typically we're blocking off 8 streets for that every winter. Several years ago, I should say, we had a credible terrorist threat based on a threat that was verbalized, and then we had I'm sure the police get warnings of possible terrorism that I'm not aware of, so I just threw an ad hoc terrorism prevention. There are a couple jurisdictions that have expressed immediate and pressing interest. City of Beaverton, they already have 10 of these barriers, and they've been using them, they said, pre-COVID at the night market and their half marathon. In the city of Gresham, also very interested. They had attempted a couple years ago to get this approved, and it just didn't make the cut list. So they're already in discussions like Portland was this year with Meridian, and they're excited if it looks like this might get approved. We'd all be on board. My final note is that on this slide, the PBOT's had the concern where we get called out, and whether it's due to there's the threat of our crews at a police type activity or politics, we're not always going to be there if the police want us to physically deploy assets. So I think this is huge, the fact that really anybody can deploy it, and if PBOT's restricted or if Public Works is it not safe for us to deploy something that police can do it directly. Next slide. And so in summary, what we're asking for is a 4-trailer kit system. Each trailer's got 8 barriers. So 4 drop deck trailers, 32 total barriers. It comes with the tow bar that you saw, the hauler, comes with the rest of cables that you're able to put the system together with, the maintenance kits, which is spare parts. There's nothing special about these trailers, but it comes with a maintenance kit for them. It comes with training, so we're gonna set up a single training session once the product's delivered, and the freight, which you can see is like about $8,000. But with that, we still need to work out a sharing system, scheduling and prioritization, which I think based on our collaboration, it would be no problem at all. We would be able to, based on the trailer system, split these trailers up, potentially put a couple east side, whether it's Portland or further east, or put a couple west side, and be able to more rapidly deploy.
Corey, we're coming up on time here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Let's have a chance to ask you questions.
Yeah, and if Josh might be able to add anything that I missed.
Any questions for Corey or Josh about this?
The only question I have is, this would be primarily used for Portland then, correct? It'd be housed in Portland.
No, that's not necessarily true. We would have to figure that out. I think we have a couple instances where we very specifically would like to see if we can get all of them. That would be like a tree lighting ceremony. But if the demand's across the region, then we'll have to map out who needs them when, and then potentially Portland gets one of them or 2 of them, and then the others get distributed. But at any point, if there's a regional priority, we can pull them all together.
I think just like all the UASI equipment, like the water treatment trailers and distribution trailers, the person, the entity who is storing, maintaining, servicing that equipment gets kind of first dibs at that equipment if they need it. But if it's not in use and another jurisdiction needs it, then they can request to use it.
Right, fine.
I think this is a very expandable project too. If we get this and we determine that there's a growing demand for it, this could potentially be further UASI requests in the future, same product.
Beth, this is Josh. I would just add to all of this that the overwhelming majority of projects that or events that these would be useful for, they're known entities. We know when they're coming. So scheduling the use and distribution of them wouldn't be, I really don't think it's going to be difficult.
Great, good stuff. Thank you, Corey and Josh. Thanks for the questions, folks. Okay, we are at time, so we're going to move on to the next item, which is actually from Josh, radio encryption.
Before we do that, Katie, can we see if Chris is on?
Chris, yeah, great.
Is Chris on?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Good point.
I think Chris has a narrow window, so I just want to.
Okay, yeah.
Accommodate.
Absolutely. All right, well, go ahead, Josh.
Sure. So in 2020 grant funds, we allocated, I think, $500,000 for the radio encryption project, maybe 600 or so if things kind of align properly. And this is a continuation of that project. So for those that were here, as you recall, the Police Bureau, Portland Police Bureau, started discussions late in 2019 about transitioning our primary dispatch net. So those are the radio channels that are used to dispatch police officers at Central Precinct, East Precinct, and North Precinct to encryption. Currently, those radio nets are not encrypted, although we have a number of other radio nets that are. So money was allocated for that in 2020, but the need was well over $1 million+. I think the estimate was that Multnomah County, in order to convert or buy radios that were encryption capable, it was almost $800,000 just for their vehicles. So this is a continuation of that project. Since then, because of budget issues, that proposal within Portland has been put on hold. So for anybody that has heard that, basically we decided to kind of hold off on spending the money to encrypt those precinct nets. However, when the protests started, Portland sort of just skipped that process and transitioned all of our dispatching for those precincts to already encrypted tactical channels. So in essence, what we thought was going to be a 12-month timeline became an overnight timeline, and we've already done it. So that creates problems for our partners in the region, law enforcement and non-law enforcement, for example, Fire Bureau and City Works, folks that we count on being able to talk to us when we're going to calls, whether there's police specific or not. So this would, again, just continue to help the agencies that didn't have it in their budget to make that transition, replace older radios that don't have the hardware capability to be encrypted.
Are you ready for questions, Josh?
I am.
Well, I'll start with a question. I guess I'm confused. Can you explain? I've heard conflicting things about radio encryption in Portland and the region. I thought I had heard that we were pulling back from that. Can you explain the nuance there?
Yeah, so and I probably wasn't entirely clear. So maybe it helps to describe to you what the radio template looks like for a police officer that is working downtown at Central Precinct. So the police radio for a Central Precinct officer, the template has a zone that would be like A, B, C, and D, and then they have a scroll knob on their radio that takes them to zone A1, A2, A3. A1 in all of the police radios is central dispatch. That is not an encrypted radio net. And so anybody who has a phone app can listen in to what the police are doing on that radio net. The goal was to encrypt that radio net, which required ComNet basically building a new template and going through and flashing all of the police radios so that on those radios, anybody who had their radio set to zone A1 would be broadcasting on central dispatch, but the radio transmission would be encrypted so that anybody who didn't have a police radio or a radio with that encryption key in it, they wouldn't be able to hear that transmission or monitor it. What happened when the protests started is we started to see pretty significant, essentially like intelligence operations that made police operations unsafe from an information standpoint. There was a lot of information that was getting out that was compromising the safety of the officers. So they simply scrolled up on their radios. If I go to zone A2, I'm at what's called Central TAC 1. That is a tactical radio net. It's already encrypted. Because we couldn't afford to accelerate the timeline and the cost to reprogram all those radios so that central dispatch was encrypted, we simply moved our regular day-to-day operations to new radio nets. So in essence, we sort of skipped over the whole process that we were trying to plan and support. And unfortunately, we've left everybody that would like to be able to talk to us on those day-to-day operational nets unable to do so. So this money would continue to do what it was intended to do originally, which is help fund the other agencies that we work with to bring them up to speed so they have the equipment that could allow them to join us on these encrypted radio nets again.
Okay, and my question was really because I thought I had heard that we were not going to go forward with that at all. That whole plan was on hold due to, I guess, pushback about, folks that had wanted access to that information and making it available for like journalists and that kind of thing. So is that not the case?
The last time I was involved in the meetings, the discussion was to purchase radios to provide the media. So the media would have the ability to monitor what the police were doing. But I mean, honestly, we haven't had meetings on this topic for quite some time because we've been busy with other things. So I can check. The last I heard from our chief's office was that the internal process was on hold, but I hadn't heard anything about upgrading external partners' radios.
Okay. Any other questions for Josh?
I have a question just so I understand a little better the money part. So phase 1 money did not get spent or did get spent?
It's 2020 grant money, so it hasn't been distributed yet.
Okay. And so this will be additional money on top of the phase 1 to complete the project?
To continue the project.
Okay. And is this phase 2 money above and beyond the set aside that the law enforcement work group gets?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry to interrupt, Katie. Do you have anybody waiting in the room? Catherine Richards says she's trying to get in.
I don't have control. I'm not the host. Laura is the host.
Laura, where are you, Laura?
So Laura had to step away from her computer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should have a co-host set up if that happens. Well, we'll get Catherine in when we can.
Okay, I'll let her know. Thanks.
Okay, I think we're at time on Josh's presentation. Thanks, Josh. I'm going to forward you something from the city's public safety technology interest group, which is why I'm having the cognitive dissonance, not understanding what you're telling me, but it's probably a lot more than I don't understand. Sure,
no,
yeah.
Thank you. As you can imagine, with the amount of activity that we've had over the last 8-9 months, it's entirely possible there's a disconnect internal to the city.
Yeah.
But having talked to the folks at ComNet outside of the city, the need to do the upgrade on these radios still exists.
Yeah, and I think that is dependent on the city of Portland and PPB moving forward with what they had originally planned.
Okay.
Just being dependent on that.
Could I
So
ask a quick
yeah,
question?
go ahead.
I was just going to ask, I want to make sure, I know that it was brought up that it was being used to pay for outside agencies to get radios that can handle encryption. Is any of the money going to actually encrypt your primary nets, or is it solely for those outside agencies to be able to talk to you?
So that was kind of faint. Let me repeat that back so I know I heard it right. The question was, is any of the money phase 1 or phase 2 going to help encrypt the radio nets, or is it just going to equipment? Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so the money is just going to equipment. So it's replacing legacy equipment that doesn't have that capability.
Okay. Thanks for the question. Thanks, Josh. Okay, we're going to move along. And Mike Myers, if you're ready, we can cover your topic, community resilience.
Well, thank you, everybody. Really good discussions today. I was specifically excited to hear a lot of the comments and thoughts around building strength and capacity in the community-based organizations. It sounds like, and this may be just new to me, it sounds like everybody else may have had previous experience with this, but it's clear for me during the COVID health crisis that we have been very dependent on the use of community-based organizations to do basic things for us, where have them pivot from their day jobs and start to provide services, particularly those that serve low-income, historically marginalized, underserved communities that can deliver humanitarian relief and other emergency support services that they may not do during their day job, but now that we have this COVID environment, we're actually asking them to do these other humanitarian relief efforts. So we have a pilot, for the CBO, for the capacity building project. It proposes that we have about 4 grants of about $25,000 that we would deliver to community-based organizations to improve their capacity to prepare and respond for emergencies. Again, this would allow them to flex outside of their normal job duties that they would do day to day, but assist us during emergencies. So some of the things we might ask them do to increase their capacity and capabilities among recipients to prepare for a more resilient when faced with emergencies and disasters. The investments might help them develop COOP plans. Maybe they might achieve NIMS compliance. They could help us plan, or they could plan to distribute water, food, or other critical supplies. And those are important things that we found during this COVID environment, where CBOs have been helping us deliver food and support food security to the community. So we are looking to find opportunities to build resilience in community-based organizations across the board, to reach deep within our communities, because we've just found that we are unable to do it as a city, and certainly as a bureau. The reason I believe it's regional, as I would assume that other counties across the state of Oregon, in order to access those same communities, have to find unique ways to do it. And these community-based organizations are already tied into these groups and know where individuals are, where marginalized, isolated, people that are lonely, where they are and how to reach them. So that's what this is about, is building that capacity, of investing in those CBOs to bring them up to some level of capability. And I am very open and excited really to hear some of the other concepts, but very open about collaborating with other applications that were presented today.
Thank you, Mike. How about any questions from folks? This is an interesting, innovative concept we haven't really seen before. And there definitely is some cross pollination opportunities here. Does anybody want to bring up any of those points?
I'd just like to second Mike's earlier sentiment. I think it was him that put it out there and maybe volunteered to try to sort of coordinate that or reach out to the various folks that seem to have some sort of CBO engagement as a part of their project. I think it would be good for us to have a meeting and just sort of get a just a general understanding of the work we've done, or sort of where we're not sure of kind of where we're going with some of that, and help fill in some of those gaps and help each other out. So I think that'd be good to coordinate.
I mean, someday I envision where the community-based organizations are doing their normal work, but during a high-level emergency, they're able to shift over. They have, communications capabilities with us. They have COOP plans. They already know what their communities are, where they're at, and they're able to really be our right arm with logistics. They have contracts with the different cities and counties. I just think there's a huge opportunity here. Again, lessons learned, but a huge opportunity for us to capitalize on. If we were to turn around and have an earthquake in the future, we're going to very much be depending on these groups, and they're doing a great job now. They just don't have the capacity or the background. They just don't have the capabilities, but I think that's where we can assist.
Yeah, and some of what I've noticed with our engagement so far too is our engagement is admittedly at this point a little bit limited, but there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect in their understanding of the disaster preparedness community as well, and so there seems to be some outreach and communication that needs to occur on that front too. So I think there's a lot of work, and it's good work.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mike. So I wanted to hop back. If Chris Voss is on the call now, I think I see Moltko on here. That might be you.
Mm-hmm. Hi.
That's me.
Oh, hi, Chris.
Hello.
Chris, feel free to go ahead and present on, what was it, planning, training, and exercise?
Yeah, so first, thank you, everybody. And I'm sorry for my tardiness. As you can imagine, our COVID numbers being where they are, that has become 2 full-time jobs, just continuing to manage our operations here in Multnomah County. And so this project here, if you remember last year, we actually received approval for this project. And we're still in the process, like sort of the money's got to sort of work through sort of the pipeline. And last year when we pitched this project, my ask was that these would be for people, and they would be for hopefully 2 years, and obviously we'd have to do 1 year at a time, where we would start to in the region start to specifically look at some projects that we had previously given to contractors. In talking to many of my peers, one of the shortfalls with some of the plans and programs that we were implementing, we kind of looked at what's the low-hanging fruit. It was that we were having a harder time taking some of the work that was being done by contractors and then sort of implementing or doing as much we could in the counties with them, also knowing that when we were bringing in contractors, the knowledge and the things learned potentially by those contractors during the course of the project are then obviously lost when the contractor leaves. And we talk specifically about the prospect of let's see if we can expand our capabilities internally in the region, and hire some folks in the region to champion some of these projects, champion some of these programs, but work in the counties to ensure that the work being done is also sort of is improving their programs. And we identified a few projects on sort of the training side. There were some plannings on the planning side. Specifically, one of the things that I wanted to do with my person was host a regular tabletop exercise across the region on some of the plans we were doing. But I wanted to sort of just note that, obviously this ask, we don't quite have the people yet. And trust me, nothing would have made me happier than having a few more folks this year when sort of COVID hit. The thought is to, implement some internal training, and obviously Columbia and Clackamas have some internal plans that they're also sort of looking to develop. Improve sort of the exercises as well that we do, but also keep these people internal to the county so that we can improve their programs. And if you've read the proposal, there were areas that we also sort of identified, specifically sort of identifying additional critical infrastructure in the region that we can hopefully improve upon our score regionally. It's interesting, this ask came out over a year ago, if you remember, when we're talking to specifically some of the FEMA infrastructure folks. They were saying, hey, one of the things that you can do to sort of help you score is to continue capture, events, activities that would then improve your score. And we're sitting there like, we barely have the bandwidth to do what we're doing now. And so that was a specific ask as well that we thought we could improve. And I think I put a number in there where I do think there are hundreds of events that we potentially are missing in the region that would also help us, because right now we've been sort of straddling the fence at sort of the very tail end of eligibility for dollars. And so I wanted that to be sort of a focus of these people as well, not just improve some of the training, not just improve the exercises, not just make sure we have sort of a regular regional cycle where we're doing some of these things, but also improve some of our numbers so that hopefully our funding is not quite as in jeopardy as it has been. As you know, a few years ago, we sort of lost. And I wish I could say more as far as the evaluation standpoint. Without the folks here, like I said, that was the reason why I thought we would need 2 years in the first place, just so that we would have the people, they'd be in-house. And then I think collectively, it allows us to sort of also come back and say, are we getting everything that we want out of these folks? Are there things that we can sort of, shift and have them do? I want to take a break here and ask, see if maybe Nancy, if she's on, if she had anything she wanted to add Like I said, I talked a little about some of the things that I wanted to focus on with our folks, specifically some exercises. Nancy, you on?
Chris, she wrote to me and said she might have difficulty getting on because she had some other things going on.
You know what? And I do want to say this, and I know it's sort of it's tough. You know, the time this year with everything going on, it sort of, I think, highlights even more the shortfall that we sometimes have in staffing. And I want people to know that we have sat down and we've talked about specific shortfalls that we think we can improve upon in the region. I don't know if someone was on from Columbia County, if they wanted to sort of maybe speak a little bit about their piece. I know they don't have that person yet this year either, but I know it was very, very important last year to Steve. If someone's on from Columbia County, I wonder if they sort of pitch their side as well.
So this is Nancy. I don't know if anyone is
on.
on. I'm sorry. I couldn't find my unmute button very quickly. I apologize. Yeah, just to reiterate, what Chris has said. I mean, first of all, this has just been a gangbanger years, right, for all of us, and trying to do this. And I'm finding less and less time just because of things that are going on for my staff and myself to do some things regionally. And I think, using this particular position to be able to do at least with the exercises and the planning, those things that need to be done is going to be critical for us being able to move forward and to being able to do some things in the region that right now we simply do not have time to do. I mean, Chris talked about that just a little bit, but yeah, I really don't have a lot more to add to that. So thank you.
Yeah, I did want to say one of the other things that we wanted to use our regional person, and hopefully if we, get the dollars soon and we bring them in, I was just allocated dollars to develop an evacuation plan in and around the CEI hub, and it would support evacuation into Columbia County and Multnomah County. So it's a joint county project. And here's another example of I have money to bring in an organization to help us develop that, but I don't even have the project manager to run the project. And so that was a regional project, a joint project that I don't think I wrote it down because we literally just got the funding, and now I'm literally scratching my head going, how do I continue to do COVID and find a project manager? So any questions on this project? Like I said, I wish there was more that we could add. Like I said, I think, in the next couple months, I'd love to provide a report out once we actually have the funding and the people and could divide up some of their activities with some of the other things that we're doing in-house.
Questions for Chris and Nancy? Chris, I'll ask, how are you working with the EOC training subcommittee right now? I know there were next steps that we've outlined about doing a crosswalk together and meeting, and it's on a tight timeline. How is that going?
You know what? I know this. I think there's a meeting planned, but I haven't had a lot more conversation with the training subcommittee since I think the last meeting we had where we said, okay, here's an opportunity, but let's just make sure if we're going to move forward that we're not overlapping with that group, and I think that we can do that.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you, Chris and Nancy.
Work where we're not going to be overlapping. I think we could divide it up.
Yeah, Chris and Nancy and Sean, I'll be reaching out to all of you.
We're at time.
Thanks, Beth. Well, we'll have an opportunity on all of these proposals. We just have a snippet of time for each of these here, and then any follow-up can also happen offline. So we will move on and we'll follow up offline on other questions. I think I skipped over you, Joe, so I'm going to go back to you for social vulnerability population estimate tool.
Yeah, this project has actually been proposed by my colleague, Julie Stringham, in the Research Center at Metro. She's in the same department. I am managing the social vulnerability tools project, and she put forward this proposal for the social vulnerability population estimate tool. They're closely linked, and I was happy to discuss it, but I'm actually now just getting instant messaging from her that's saying that she is indeed available. And so I'm wondering if we can, and I was happy to go over it because there is a lot of overlap, and even if she can come in real quick and discuss hers more specifically, I think it would be good for me to highlight some of that overlap. And I was really glad that I was here so I could hear all these other CBO pieces and see how much overlap there was with other projects and the SVT project. But could we skip me and maybe come back to it in like 10 minutes while I coordinate and
Absolutely.
forward
Just
her?
You can ping me on the chat and let me know when you're ready.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so I think next we have John Wheeler and Nancy Bush for recovery planning phase 2.
Actually, I don't think John's ready to do that. He needed his piece to be after 3:30.
3 o'clock. Yeah, okay. Let's move along. We'll come back to them. What about Catherine Richards' 2 items? We have clinical safety, net capacity building.
Yes, hello, I'm here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Everyone. Hi. So this is for the healthcare systems work group, and I will be talking about the HPO nonprofit feasibility study. And then once that is complete, then Ed Colson will be speaking to the Coalition of Community Health Clinics project concept. So for the HPO nonprofit feasibility concept and study comes in at about 51,500, our best estimate. This is really to look at exploring to a nonprofit healthcare coalition. So the HPO, the Northwest Oregon Health Preparedness Organization, has served in the capacity of a preparedness coalition since its inception in 2001. It includes representation from all of our hospitals and health systems, public health, county emergency management, emergency medical services, medical societies, although they're closing their doors the end of December now, which is very sad, and also safety net clinics. And our mission is to ensure that Northwest Oregon, which is our region, is prepared and responds effectively and efficiently to large-scale health emergencies that have impacts across institutional and jurisdictional lines. So this does include Clatsop, Clackamas, Columbia, Multnomah, Washington, and Tillamook counties, and we also partner with Clark County, Washington as well. So our interest, excuse me for not looking at the camera, I have 2 screens and they're not very close apart at home. So the interest in exploring this transition to a nonprofit actually first came up in 2012. And that's really primarily from a commitment to sustaining the strong collaborative of the healthcare system emergency preparedness and coordination with hospitals and health systems and all of the partners that I just mentioned. And its secondary concern was and remains dwindling federal funds to support that sustainment. The HPO has endured a 92% cumulative reduction in funding over 16 years in the hospital preparedness program. As you can only imagine, that's quite significant. And we're grateful for the funds that we've received from UASI for other projects, quite a few. Anyway, we do have details on the restructure efforts within a project concept. But creating a nonprofit could really open the ability to receive funding from healthcare memberships, corporate sponsorships, and other philanthropic and earned revenue to fulfill its vision. There's a great model in the Seattle-King County area called the Northwest Healthcare Response Network that we worked with to help in our initial evaluation of that feasibility back in 2012, 2013. So as it is today, the HPO and staff are scheduled to be moved to the Oregon Health Authority under their Health Security Preparedness and Response Program on July 1st of 2021. And since our inception in 2001, we've enjoyed the freedom of autonomy by being seated locally in Multnomah County while successfully meeting our grant deliverables and collaborating with the Oregon Health Authority very closely. So really what we're looking at is a study to determine the feasibility of transitioning our structure to a nonprofit healthcare and response organization, which has the potential to bring new voices, more voices, along with additional funding opportunities to better and more equitably serve the region. So how I'm thinking this will happen is if it's funded, then work would be done ahead of time on a contractor request for proposal for our steering committee approval. And then we would confirm partners' willingness to serve on a panel. And then as soon as the funds are made available, that RFP would go out and be reviewed and a contractor selected. And so that contractor would then be briefed on what we've looked at in the past and the barriers that we experienced to any types of restructuring in order to best figure out how to move that study forward. Then there would be one-on-one conversations with stakeholders on the willingness to really steward and to own a nonprofit model. And then we would have 1 or 2 regional workshops to review the restructure history, define our prioritized core services, examine our current and desired stakeholders, and then that contract would also develop a proposed business plan that would include things like financial projections, a governing structure, implementation steps, and a specific timeline with tasks for completion. And then this would be presented to the partners for final agreement and if there was approval to move forward with that. And just in case you're wondering, this type of approach is absolutely endorsed by the federal grant, the Hospital Preparedness Program grant. They actually clearly stated that in the most current grant that we're operating under. So that is not a concern to us. So that is the overview that I have for you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
It's a pretty interesting one. Thank you, Catherine. Are there questions? All right. Do you have another project to present to us, Catherine?
Just before I do, I wanted to see if Sherry Forstloff had anything that she'd like to add. She's our work group chair. And if not, that's okay.
No, Catherine, you did a great job. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. So now I'd like to introduce Ed Colson, who will walk through the clinical safety net capacity building.
Well, thank you for that.
And Mara,
Catherine.
hi.
And Mara, yes. And so thank you everyone for attending this afternoon here. Thank you, Catherine. I'd also like to introduce Mara Gross. She is our interim executive director for the Coalition of Community Health Clinics. And so our concept is a clinical safety net capacity building. And so we can go on to our next slide here. And so I'll turn over for this introduction here to Mara. She'll give kind of a background of CCHC and what they provide here. Mara?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ed and Catherine. So just a little bit of background on who we are as a coalition and our health equity work, because I think so much of what we do in terms of emergency preparedness is really focused on health equity. So we are a network of 17 safety net health clinics in the Portland region. Many of them are based in Multnomah County, but also serve populations in Clackamas and Washington County. And we partner with some of the other large providers of healthcare safety net, including the counties, Virginia Garcia, et cetera. Our member clinics served about 90,000 unique patients last year and about 400,000 visits to give a sense of scale. About patients to our clinics, over half are below the federal poverty line and 9 out of 10 are below 200% of poverty. 1 in 5 speak a language other than English at their appointments. And so our clinics really focus primarily on supporting the health and well-being of people that have historically lacked access to comprehensive health care. And many of our clinics provide culturally specific care, including to the Black, Indigenous, Latino, LGBTQ+ communities. And I guess I'll just say that we know that BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color, have historically been denied quality health care. People with disabilities are disproportionately represented among those communities, and we know this contributes to significant health disparities and poor health outcomes, and that COVID-19 has underscored the burden on these populations, as well as seniors, medically vulnerable, people who are without homes. And so our goal is to continue to improve opportunities and services to access healthcare, improve health outcomes, especially before, during, and after disasters. And just note that we have strong relationships in the health equity sector with advocacy and service organizations and a number of direct services that we work with our partners to provide. And I think with that background, I will turn it over to Ed, who is our content expert and actually knows emergency preparedness and our work really deeply.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mara. So we can go on to the next slide. So based upon what we've heard, there's a lot of, as it was brought out, a lot of crossover with the type of emergency preparedness planning. Some of the work that we have done in the past that we've worked with CCHC on is providing the technical assistance to these clinics. A lot of them don't have the in-house capability to have an emergency manager or the foundational background in emergency planning. Yet we know, as Mara brought out, how many patients they see. And a lot of these patients are primarily attached to these clinics, either through their PCP or very familiar in gaining care. So preparing the clinics and able to, for whatever disaster may come about, like earthquake planning, what we see with COVID-19, to kind of bridge the gap and shore up these clinics and emergency management planning so that they don't overwhelm the hospitals with seeking care up there. So some of the work that we have done is helping them in developing emergency plans and surge planning, as well as being able to provide some sort of foundational management so that they can have an emergency management program, whether it's through introduction to incident command or developing emergency plans within themselves. We've also conducted workshops in the past. Some of the previous examples that we've done is on communications planning. We also have conducted tabletop exercises which assist them when it comes to their accreditation. They have to report to Medicare, Medicaid services that they have conducted tabletop exercises. So this allows a conduit for us to be able at the clinics to support that. We also share best practices and communication of situation status reports, as well as kind of provide the guidance that if we see something happening and occurring outside of the regional area that may affect them, that we can let them know to start preparing for their operations there, such as the inclement weather, pandemic, supply shortages. And we can go on to our next slide here. So 2020 was a very busy year. So what we've done is provided a technical assistance to them in providing COVID-19 planning. We help them disseminate the information from the OHA and CDC, situation status reports that we receive from the HPO. And then we help them in coordinating emergency management needs for COVID-19 specific items. In addition to that, we have also been awarded grants for PPE. These clinics normally don't have access to the normal supply chains that are existing around there for PPE. And so through these grants, we've been able to work to provide an interim solution for them to be able to get PPE while supply chains either come back up or are in, or if they have been back ordered for a period of time. During the Oregon wildfires, that was a very enlightening time for these clinics because these clinics, some of their satellite clinics were located in Clackamas County. So we had to provide, or we assisted in providing evacuation messaging and situational reporting and giving them technical assistance to be able to prepare their employees and what to do next for any evacuation that would be occurring. And then afterwards, what we did is we conducted a hot wash of the executive administrator or clinic administrators and executives to ask them what could have been done better, what didn't go good. And so that was a very opening experience because it showed how much the coalition or the clinics within the coalition are very critical to their community and their patients. And so the wildfires and COVID-19 have provided a very good case example for us to be able to build upon for the upcoming years, especially when it comes to earthquake planning and recovery planning. So that's what we have done at the CCHC. And so we'll be happy to take any questions.
Excellent presentation. Thank you. Any questions?
No questions, but just a comment that I think you've done some really great work over the years, and appreciate the depth and how much you stretch money. So thank you.
Could I add just one to that as well? We have been working with the coalition since 2004, and their work is really critical to helping protect the hospitals as well. And so just want to really thank them for everything that they've done. And their role during COVID has provided to be extremely critical, and really appreciate your willingness to step up and create your own ordering system for the personal protective equipment. We were able to secure some COVID supplemental funds for PPE for those clinics for them. So really appreciate your partnership, and thanks for a great presentation.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, any questions on this one? Okay, well, I really appreciate the thorough presentation and the amount of preparation you put into it. That will serve you well, of course. Really, you guys are setting the bar here, so thanks for all of your work. All right, we are going to go back to Joe, and I think we have Julie Stringham on here, so we're going to go back to that item, social vulnerability. Yep.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm working on the social vulnerability tools project, significant overlap between the two. Yeah, I'll just hand it over to Julie and let her take off. And if there's questions on either of these projects, I'm happy to weigh back in.
Thanks, Joe. First, can everyone hear me okay? I just jumped into this call, so just a quick tech check.
Yep, sound good.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so the development of this project was really through recognizing through the wildfire crisis and other crises that organizations and special districts within Greater Portland really need to have a reliable and readily accessible data source that captures the scale and demographic characteristics of populations affected by a disaster. Furthermore, there's a demonstrated need to identify vulnerable populations that may experience barriers to resources, both equity plan for and respond to disasters. And many jurisdictions have demonstrated the capacity to perform such analyses, but without a region-wide methodology for assessing vulnerability and estimating populations, jurisdictions can produce disparate estimates. And additionally, smaller jurisdictions without access to robust GIS resources may not have the ability to perform such analyses on the fly, but could benefit from understanding where vulnerable populations are located in their areas nonetheless. So we're proposing to use existing expertise within the Research Center to develop an overlay analysis tool that produces up-to-date data of populations affected by disasters with the ability to split data by population segments such as race and ethnicity, income, limited English proficiency, and age. The tool would produce like a web-hosted source of information such as an API, a table, or a dashboard, which would be made available to organizations within the 5-county region. And as Joe mentioned, there's a lot of overlap with this project and the social vulnerability tool, and we're really intending to build off of the work that Joe has been doing with the SVT to enrich demographic data and population estimation methodologies with the end goal of enabling jurisdictions to capture characteristics of affected populations and ultimately to plan for and respond to disasters in an equitable way. We're really planning to deploy these final deliverables in an online cloud-based GIS and mapping platform, such as ArcGIS Online, which we currently use to house a lot of these data dashboard services and applications. This will allow the final deliverable to be deployed independent of our own in-house infrastructure so that it remains accessible in case our technical infrastructure is compromised during a disaster. It should be noted that oh, sorry. I apologize. I just learned about this call like about 15 minutes ago, so my summary is a little bit disjointed here, but I'm powering through with my best. I guess we should note that we have some disaster preparedness and response projects happening in parallel to the planning of this tool. So specifically the COVID recovery data project is an effort that's currently going on in the DRC to discover and potentially develop a centralized data repository and dashboards to aid in community-based public and private sectors in recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're hoping to, or the CRD project is hoping to employ outcomes from the social vulnerability tool, including this project as well. And so we're really hoping to find some synergistic interactions happening between the social vulnerability tool and the vulnerable population estimation tool. Our end goals through this tool are providing jurisdictions and special districts within the 5-county region with a tool to provide population estimates with an agreed upon methodology and to reduce the risk of users reporting conflicting estimates. It also hopes to, again, dovetail off of the SVT deliverables and compensate for undercounted populations and provide more accurate estimates of populations with barriers to resources during and after disasters. That's pretty much all I have for you today. I don't know, Joe, do you want to follow up with anything else?
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick. I think we've used up our 5 minutes pretty sufficiently, but I think we're still ahead of schedule. So, you know, the words social and vulnerability and tool are in both of these projects. Obviously, a lot of conceptual overlap. The word tool in my project really refers to developing a social vulnerability index, developing the input data, and the index is the output data, developing maps that can be used by the region and by the individual counties, an index for the region, in specific county indexes with local data helping to augment the commonly used federal data, maps for the region and for each of the counties, a report and a training on how to use the data and how to interpret and use the indices. You know, so there's a lot of tools, but the big tool that's kind of missing in all of that, and it's not funded by that project that I'm managing, is an ability to sort of have an interactive interface that you can go in and sort of touch the data and do something with it. A lot of the jurisdictions have their own GIS programs and ability to do all that analysis themselves, so it's not really an issue. But a lot of the smaller jurisdictions and you know, CBOs and whatnot may not have that capacity or capability to do something meaningful with the data or the static maps. On top of that, the ability to sort of overlay different jurisdictional boundaries, smaller cities, disaster boundaries, or maybe a boundary that you yourself are interested in that might join a couple of jurisdictions or territories. That's not a part of sort of this tool, the tool that I'm working on. And so Julie's project is really sort of taking that data and sort of adding on top of it an ability to sort of interact with it and customize it to each jurisdiction's desires and needs. So that's kind of how I kind of at a very high level kind of envision that value add there.
Thank you so much, Joe and Julie. Beth, could I get a time check?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah.
We have about 2.5 more minutes on this topic, so.
Well, I'll ask a question. FEMA's National Risk Index just came out recently. Can you explain how the tools you're proposing would relate to that? For example, are you going to be issuing corrections to FEMA, or, you know, going in more detail or looking to validate what they put out?
Yeah, we plan on correcting all of their work. No. A lot of those federal, you know, CDC has their social vulnerability index as well, and FEMA now has this index as well. You know, different approaches use different methods and different data, and so we plan on, you know, I've been using CDC social vulnerability index as kind of that starting point to sort of look at I think there's about 16 variables that they sandwich into 4 different sort of factors that then go into this index. But, you know, I'm not as familiar with FEMA's, but we definitely plan on looking to that and understanding either how it can be an input or how it can be a methodological kind of add-on that we learn from, or perhaps find the gaps in. Really, the value add for the Social Vulnerability Tools project, that again is one of the inputs into the population estimation tool project, is that we're augmenting, you know, in CDC's social vulnerability example, they're using just those 16 or so variables from census or ACS federal data. And we're planning on augmenting that with county specific local data to help fill some of the categorical or spatial gaps, you know, where it's not categorically very refined, or more commonly not spatially very refined. And so it is, you know, not necessarily to reinvent the wheel or be significantly better in some way, but just to be a little bit more locally refined to our region.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
This is Laura Hansen. If I can just chime in quickly to say that I compared what's in FEMA's tool with the CDC tool, and I think they're just drawing from the CDC tool for what FEMA's put forward. And it's not, it goes kind of to the same level of granularity. So I still think, just to reinforce what Joe said, what we'd be developing locally would be much more responsive and more granular to our community's specific vulnerabilities. And then I wanted to also just say that Julie and I talked while she was developing the concept, and I don't know if it's was highlighted verbally here, but I know Julie did outreach to Clackamas County's GIS folks, and then also to the Portland GIS folks who had embedded with the state's wildfire response teams to get their take on utility of this kind of regional tool, and both gave an endorsement. I just thought that was important to note, that folks who'd gone through a recent effort felt like having something pre-established would be helpful, so they don't have to establish it in the moment.
We're at time.
Okay, thanks, Beth. Well, I really appreciate this presentation, and Laura's point about getting buy-in from folks that you're planning to work with. That is super crucial when you're putting these concepts together. And then if they're greenlit, you know, as you put together the final proposal, that's exactly what we're going to want to see. But even at this stage, having done that research and groundwork is really important for the evaluation committee when they go in to score those proposals. So if you've done that and you can show that you've done that and you've got buy-in, that makes your proposal concept a lot stronger. So, okay, let's see. Who is next? Did we get John Wheeler yet?
No, he's not available till after 3:30.
After 3:30. Okay, got it. Thanks. Let's move on. How about Michael Smith for the PDCC?
I believe Michael is on.
I am. How's my mic this time?
Sounds good.
Okay. So going to start off with the off-grid texting network. It's come out of the wildfire situation that we had. As many of you might know, that PGE decided to turn off the power from Mount Hood, which was about 30 miles worth of Highway 26 between Sandy and up over the mountain, to mitigate any risks of starting fires. And during that, we discovered that the phone companies at the cell sites only have between 3 and 5 hours worth of fuel or backup power on hand. So as a lot of you also know, Clackamas County's 911 center also evacuated during that wildfire season. So a discussion came up about how would we have done this if we didn't have any cellular service? How would we have coordinated in the background? Our day-to-day operations are well taken care of for the radio needs. Our systems are resilient. We can handle dispatching of units, but the question of how do we, if you just don't have internet or LTE, how do you communicate to set up a plan of bringing people in, whether it's dispatchers, techs, or any of the other admin staff? So we started to envision a project. We've received reallocation funds for this year, and we are currently piloting a project to test out a few technologies. The intention of this ask is it's slightly vague because it's building on whatever comes out of this pilot project that we're doing that should be done by January. So we're looking at a few technologies. One is an old school 900 megahertz two-way pager, like the ones that you would have had that had the little screen and a keyboard. We do have an already built out paging system in Clackamas and Washington County, and we're just having to see if we can make it two-way, and then what the feasibility would be like to turn it on a regional level. It would require some infrastructure. We've also partnered with GoTenna, if you're familiar with the hiking commercial version. It's a mesh network where you attach your phone to it by Bluetooth, and then it can send messages across the unit that you have by radio signals to the next unit, and then you can hop up to 6 times to find your final destination of message. So we've partnered with them to use their military grade version, which is a higher powered version and more ruggedized. And we're also working with the Clackamas C800 group, which is the radio team, to be able to put them on their towers about 180 feet in the air to get distance and create a backbone between the towers, which through the pilot, we're seeing if we can accomplish this and see if it's feasible. There is a lot of build out that would be required and maintenance for that, as it's a completely new system. And then the other option is the current land mobile radio system that we have that we use for just regular dispatching, being able to use that system now that Washington County and Clackamas County will be coming online with a new Motorola system that allows for texting as well as radio communications, but it's also linked to Portland and to Clark County's radio system. So this might be the end solution that we're going to do, where the radios are more expensive. We found a cheaper option down to about a $2,000 level, but the concept is that we want to keep it as a low cost buy-in, one-time cost, that some of it is sort of assumed, the maintenance is assumed by the radio providers based on the initial buy-in. So the intention is this project is supposed to be for everyone. We're piloting it in Clackamas and just for 911 in the pilot, but the possibilities of the radio system being used by all of the agencies having their own radio channel with the new system is completely available to have, hundreds of them. So if one agency wanted any of the agencies wanted to use this in the background, they could certainly do it and have their own communications channels in the background to talk to each other. I think that is a good overview. Are there questions about it?
No questions? Well, thanks, Michael. And it does sound like an interesting, as usual, I learn a lot about technology and capabilities when you present on these topics. Let's go ahead and roll into the next one you've got.
All right. I think it should be, 911 resiliency. So like I mentioned, the Clackamas County 911 Center evacuated during the wildfires. And because of the regional planning that we did and partly projects that RDPO assisted with, we were able to seamlessly move a dispatch center to 2 separate dispatch centers, both Lake Oswego's dispatch center for call taking and Washington County for dispatching of units. So we made the news, and it was good for an evacuation, which it never usually is. But because of those projects, we were able to really leverage them to make it as seamless as possible. What's coming up now with wildfires and with COVID specifically is social distancing, and what happens if we have an exposure in one of the dispatch centers of how do we continue providing services. So a dispatcher might not be sick, or they could be asymptomatic and fully capable of working, but we can't bring them in and have them possibly spread to other people because we're very close in the physically in the centers, and the desks are not easily movable. So we've been exploring options of being able to have people call take and dispatch from home with provided equipment through some networking equipment that we have piloted and done full projects on, rolling it out for some of the other systems that we employ, but not for the phone and radio network. So we're looking to do that. We're looking at also the possibilities of the state is working down the next gen 911 path, which will allow us to do a few things. And we want to use some of the money to do a study of the vendors that provide these services for next gen 911 to give us a real good overview of all of the different, or a good comparison of all the different vendors that are out there and what they're presenting. We've already gone down the road of having presentations by these vendors, but there's a lot of information and there's a lot of different technical aspects of that I don't think that we're fully capable of understanding. So we'd like to get some outside help to help us decide on the route to go with next gen 911. That next gen 911 brings on a lot of that redundancy that because it's all now IP-based phone routing, it will allow us to send all of our calls to any center, or more so, like in the case of Portland, if their building becomes uninhabitable, or their trailer, a backup trailer becomes uninhabitable, or basically if they become a crater, no one dispatch center in the region can handle the amount of call volume that they have. With the regional, with the next gen 911, we could actually split up, and their call takers could go to all 4 of the other centers in the area and take calls in those centers as if they were sitting in their own dispatch center. So there's lots of other things that we're just, we're really looking into, making sure that we continue to provide services no matter what. Definitely bringing on resiliency for user partner agencies to make sure that they continue to provide services that we funnel through to them with information that we have. So are there any questions about that?
Any questions for Michael on this?
I guess, Michael, could you just go over just a little bit of what each of the partners really sees as its responsibility and resiliency versus what you think a regional organization like ours is responsible for? Because just we might have a little bit of pushback on, a lot of agencies are having to make some of these same kind of maneuvers in their own realm.
Yeah, so we, I guess, the way to put it is we're the front line. When someone needs help, they're going to call 911. So our agencies have done years and years and years worth of everyday planning just to make sure that even the small events don't take us down, because a very a fiber line cut for telecommunications can just instantly shut down 911. So there are things that have to be done at that level, at the dispatch center level, as well as some things that can be done at the regional level through the PDCC. So we'll focus on both the regional aspect as well as the individual centers. They all still have to overcome the same problems. It just has to be done at a local level, and we can utilize the same technology. It just is going to be its own implementation at each center. Did that kind of
and I was just
cover it?
wondering if you're anticipating, I know it's early, obviously it's a conceptual project and you need the assessment data, but just the cost, probably the costs are going to exceed what you're asking for, is I think what I'm asking, and that local jurisdictions or local partners will be covering those costs.
So next gen 911 is going to be upwards of $30 million. So yeah, this is not going to fund next gen 911. And we're not going to come back and try and get $30 million over the years. We may ask, we're going to continue to ask for more resiliency money, but specifically with this project, is we're definitely looking to get the study done to figure out which is the best solution for us, and so that we can actually compare the next gen 911 systems when the state's ready to move on it, and then also to continue to mitigate these risks that have come out of COVID and the wildfires, and as you know, the idea of socially distancing in a dispatch center was somewhat thought of, but our equipment is very costly to move, and they're all proprietary systems, and we want to make it so that we could just walk into a hotel and prop up an entire dispatch center in a couple hours, or even just use single hotel rooms to let people dispatch from, so that they can be isolated. And yeah, it's an interesting time, and interesting problems.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all right, then I guess we'll roll into your last item here, CAD to CAD.
Yep, so I'm sure everyone knows about CAD to CAD because we've asked for the last 5 years. I just want to clarify. So the CAD to CAD system had multi-phases, and each phase was multi-year. So phase 1 was to bring on all of the emergency dispatch centers in the area, and get them integrated. This still kind of falls under the phase 1 because state police is an emergency dispatch center. So everything that we've done and asked for money each year has built the system, enhanced it, not maintain it. So last year we asked and received for bringing ODOT on the system, and we are moving forward with that. And then now we want to bring another agency in to increase that level of coordination in the region, especially as state police runs about 27,000 calls a year in the Portland metro area, with very little to no visibility into what they're doing. So the amount of time that it takes for them to go in pursuit of a vehicle, and then someone has to call us to tell us where it's at, and then we have to relay all that information. If we can use CAD to CAD, we could very instantly be able to send them or receive a call from them with the necessary information. They'll be linked. We'll get to have a better understanding of where their assets are at, because we'll have location services through for their vehicles. And it can be shared regionally amongst all of the 911 centers. And it's really, again, just an enhancement of the system that we currently have and we currently maintain, and we pay a hefty amount to maintain it. But it has been an amazing asset for us, not just in everyday life, but with COVID, we're using it to send alerts, to public health about certain scenarios. We're using it to better compile information across the region. Alerting is fantastic. We're also using it to be able to send information to utility companies, and our intention is to also expand it in the future to PGE and Northwest Natural. And I know certainly with Portland's use of not just Portland controls their own highways, which is unusual compared to all the other counties in the area, but Portland relies heavily in the recent times with the protests on state police being in their area, and this way that they could more easily coordinate from their own, Portland could use their own computer system to monitor state police, or state police can use their own system to monitor Portland, rather than having to learn different programs. But they would all have the same amount of information. It would just be consolidated into each respective CAD.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Any questions for Michael?
I will say that we will probably come back and ask for more, to add another agency, not to maintain it. Out of this, we are actually, when we started offering to ODOT and OSP to join our system, they have an old system that they're trying to replace, and we're looking for dealing with all the outside agencies outside of the UASI region. And we are looking like we might be the allowing the outside regions to come onto the system. Won't be funded by UASI. We're looking at other funding methods, but it's truly becoming a outside of our region asset, and it's looking like it can possibly expand significantly in the state.
That sounds good. All right. Well, I really appreciate all the presentations so far. There's quite a few we've heard from. And I don't see John on the call quite yet, but we can pivot to him as soon as he joins. That's our last one I think we're waiting to hear from on the list. But I did want to touch on something that I was going to come to at the end of the meeting, which is chair nominations. So, or I should say vice chair nominations. Jack Nuttall is our vice chair, and I have every intention of making him, if we vote on to approve, I think we have to vote on Jack becoming chair at the next meeting. We also need a nomination to fill Jack's spot. And so this was not on the agenda, but I did remember during our call that we should look at it. So it's kind of an administrative item. And our SOP for this committee is on the RDPO website. We updated it January of 2019. And I'll just share, let's see here, sharing my screen here. So eligibility, who can be a vice chair or chair? Anybody from any of our work groups or subcommittees or task forces can serve in those spots, but only one representative from that can hold a leadership position. So we can't have someone from who's also the chair of an active committee also being the program committee chair at the same time. So we've seen a lot of this kind of succession planning in the past where someone was the chair of RemTech or RMC, and then they come up and they serve in this position instead of continuing on in whatever else they were doing. But that doesn't have to be that way. We could have somebody from any of our work groups serve in that position. So I'll send out a reminder to everybody on the committee. So not everybody was able to make it today, but we are looking at that, and we need to address that in our next meeting in December. Because if we don't get anybody, then we have to figure out what we're going to do. That's part of the process here. If we don't have any nominations, we have to work together to find somebody to fill that position. And the term limits are just 1 year. Any questions about the chair, vice chair nomination or election process?
This is Jack. I'd just like to encourage people to have a think about it. It's been a terrific learning opportunity being the vice chair. I'd really encourage anybody who's interested in RDPO and regional planning to really put their name forward. I'm looking forward to next year in 2021 and being the chair and seeing what that brings.
If anybody's thinking about becoming vice chair, it's a great time to ask questions, or you can connect offline with Jack and I. We can help answer questions about what the lift looks like. So start thinking about the nominations and folks you know and work with, your colleagues, and if they might be interested in that. Okay, well, we are waiting for John, eagerly awaiting his presence. Do we have slides, Beth, for that item, recovery planning, phase 2? No slides?
No.
Okay. And then Nancy jumped off, so it'll just be John, is that right?
That's right. They had kind of a collision of demands on their attention at this time period. So
okay,
we could just give John a couple minutes. I'm sure he'll be joining us.
Okay.
If he's involved. I mean, it is 2020 and COVID's at play. So I'm sure he'll be here or he'll send something.
Okay,
should we do a sing along or something?
Just, is there anything else?
This is Robin. Are we as a program committee going to vote on these projects moving forward, or is it just going to be the evaluation committee, or just how does that work?
Let me bounce back to that. Yeah, so I have to look at my notes that Beth gave me for this meeting so I don't screw anything up. But what it is these are just presentations, kind of, I think, as FYI, correct me if I'm wrong, Denise, but I think that it's a sort of a courtesy, but the actual voting will happen at the steering committee.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
I do think, if I may say, that your opinions really matter. So yeah, I think if, in this case, if there's anything that you haven't said about the projects or any project that you think, where did that come from? I think, all is really good information. So
Yeah,
I don't want you to not feel that you have value.
Absolutely. And Denise, what would be the best way? So if folks are still thinking about what their questions are, and maybe they haven't read the proposals yet, but they have time in a little bit. If they want to follow up and suggest a question or something for the evaluation committee.
Yeah, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I would say Beth is our focal point, our point of contact for everything. So
people can just email me, and I'll put my email address in the chat box so you can see how to do that.
Yeah, because we did go pretty fast through some of these, and some of them kind of ate into their time for Q&A. So it's not like that's your only opportunity, not at all. So as you start to review them in more detail and you want to know more, just send those questions to Beth, and then the evaluation committee can look at that as well. And we're going to meet next Monday and send our recommendations to the steering committee for their December 7th meeting. And that will be to greenlight concepts for full proposals. And then at that point, they do have 2 months to write their full proposal. So that's when they'll take that feedback that we gave them and improve upon it. Okay. And I'm just going to open it up for good of the order while we're waiting for John. If there's any items that folks want to bring forward or news to share.
Katie, if I can pipe up, it's Glenn.
Sure.
I just want to reiterate and reinforce a theme that emerged early on in the call. Several people mentioned about the fact that many groups are approaching the CBO considerations. And I think there's positive overlap in that, and the idea of having a call for all these interested parties to get together. And I'm not saying it's a separate work group or anything like that, but I think we all have these perspectives that need airing, and probably would inform this process much better next year if we can share those thoughts and report back to each other about what's going on locally, perhaps more comprehensively. So I would just throw that out there. If that happens, I would be more than happy to participate in that kind of discussion.
Yeah, Glenn, I'm actually kind of taking notes on who seemed to be interested in that, or what projects seemed to have that component to it. And so far, I've got the implement public engagement lessons with Jamie Smelland and Pilar Montejo, the Citizen Corps with Renati Garrison. I know I'm mispronouncing probably all of these names. Community Resilience with Mike Myers, Disaster Messaging with Laura Hall, and then Glenn, you just sort of mentioned yourself there. Is there anybody else, or are there other projects that seem relevant to that discussion? I plan on sending a little invite out for folks.
I would suggest, Glenn, if you could connect Joe to Jonna from the Portland ECC's Joint Volunteer Information Center. One thing that Portland is working on is long-term, how do we transition the good work that we've started in our hotbed or test bed at the ECC into ongoing COAD work and community resilience work that the city will continue doing forever. And so that's not something that's not plugged into the RDPO per se, other than kind of tangentially. So I think you'll also want to connect with groups like that at jurisdictions.
There was a question that Chris left in the chat. Actually, I didn't realize it was just to me, but and I think he's off now. He asked, does anyone know if the social vulnerability, this tools project, Joe, if you're coordinating with the current Data Mart project, and I think that's the Multnomah County Data Mart project. Do you know that project?
I'm not sure. We're not really intensively or formally coordinating really with any other project, but I have been sort of tangentially informed of these other projects that are occurring. And so, you know, some of these pieces still need to be put together a little bit, but there is someone on the technical advisory team that I'm still waiting to get. It's a tentative response that I've gotten so far for being on the technical advisory group from Datamart.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I think maybe Laura had something.
I think that maybe we want to check in also with public health because they have other data sources, including something called Empower, which I'm just learning about.
Okay. And we do have, you're saying Multnomah County Public Health, is that right?
You know what, Joe, I'll email you separately with
Okay. I'm gonna put my email in the chat right now.
Great.
Keep using the wrong keyboard.
Denise or Beth, have you heard from John if he's still able to come to this meeting?
I just was looking in my email and I haven't seen anything from him. Oh, he says he just joined. So Eva, can you let him in? Oh, I think he's in the other meeting.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't see him.
Okay.
You'll have to get the link to him.
Yeah, let me, I'm gonna go try to do that right now. Carry on with your roundtable and I'll be back. I'll be back.
Okay. Anything else for good of the order?
Katie, you mentioned Jonna just a minute ago. Is that Jonna with Portland Bureau of Emergency Management?
Correct.
Okay.
I will just mention that Portland ECC did a 6-month progress report on our COVID response. It's now posted to our city COVID webpage. And it's kind of an abridged, abbreviated version. It doesn't include our challenges and recommendations section. It's for public consumption, but if folks are interested, I can provide the full version as well. But I wanted to let people know we did that. Hey, John.
Hey, Katie.
We have been eagerly awaiting your presence. So we are ready whenever you are to hear your proposal concept for recovery
All
planning.
right. Great. Well, I apologize for jumping on late. I had to cover another meeting that I couldn't get out of. So I appreciate everybody's patience and forbearance while you're all waiting for me to come to this meeting. Let me ask Katie, how much, just to validate, how much time do I have? 5 minutes or less?
Yeah, I think Beth, how much time? How are we giving folks?
Yeah, you've got a total of 8 minutes for the whole thing, but that leaves a few minutes at the end for Q&A.
Okay, I'll try and do it in less than that. So I think I know everybody. This is John Wheeler, Emergency Management Manager for Washington County Emergency Management. And I'm here to talk about the project concept for the recovery planning phase 2, which is a request for $180,000, $150,000 of that to support planning, and $30,000 for an exercise is what we have budgeted for it. So the background on this is that, and many of you were involved in an effort previously in the region, an RDPO project to develop a regional recovery framework. Consultant was hired to help us develop that regional recovery framework for the 5-county region. And that was successfully completed with the expectation that that was phase one of that project. We wanted to establish some guidelines and standards for how recovery is done in the region, and then work at the county level to implement the standards and guidelines in that regional framework to a local recovery frameworks. Clackamas County in the last pipeline, Clackamas County and Washington County agreed to be the first two counties in the metro region to embark upon a recovery planning project. And we were successful in getting UASI grant funds for that. Unfortunately, the time at which we were planning to start that project was roughly in August of this year. And neither Clackamas County or Washington County was in a position to proceed with the project at that time to develop a recovery framework. So after some back and forth, we decided to turn that money back to the RDPO for reprogramming. But we also wanted to plan to do what we're doing today, which is to come back to the RDPO to request this phase two funding for the second cycle as a second attempt. We do believe that we'll have the bandwidth in order to do the project in the performance period for the 2021 UASI grant. We just can't do it in the current grant. So the good news, and one thing that will definitely leverage this project are a couple things. Is number one, both Washington and Clackamas County are very heavily involved in recovery activities. Probably Clackamas County more than anybody is involved in a recovery operation right now. But in both cases, we're developing relationships with the economic development community and with other stakeholders that will be involved in the development of our recovery plan. The other benefit to what's happened so far is since we have planned to do the project starting in August, we had done some project planning at the beginning of the year. Molly Bradley and Chris from Clackamas County and Chris Walsh from Washington County got together, and they actually did a fair amount of project planning for this project and developed a fairly detailed work plan, and had even started on a request for proposals to do the hiring of a contractor. We established our concept of operations for how the two counties would work together in parallel to develop two separate recovery plans for the two jurisdictions. And so this kind of meets the standard, I think, for being a fairly shovel-ready project when we're ready to go with this, assuming we get approval to use from the RDPO steering committee to advance this and to use UASI 2021 funds for the project. We should be ready to go to complete the project, we hope, fairly efficiently. And so this will be we'll develop county-specific recovery plans. And one question that came up previously is that we will also look at supporting our cities within our jurisdictions with recovery, within our recovery planning efforts as well. We'll use the recovery support functions and the other standards that are identified in the regional recovery framework in this plan. So again, this is a total of $180,000 ask. This is a bit more than we had requested in the 2020, or was it 2019? I can't remember which, UASI grant. Just because in doing the project planning, we were a little concerned that we had enough funding in order to implement this project. So we're fairly confident that the two counties can be successful with this project for that amount of money there. Why don't I pause there and see if there are any questions? Or actually, I should say I'm pretty much done with my presentation, so I'll just ask if there are any questions.
John, is this an all hazards recovery plan or is it specific to big one?
It's an all hazards recovery plan.
Works for pandemics, economic recessions, civil unrest. Is there any way to recover from 2020 is what I'm asking.
Yeah, well, 2020, it's its own thing. Obviously, it's pretty unique. And I should say that, sort of traditional, as with the with the regional recovery framework is pandemic planning is obviously recovering from a pandemic is a unique thing because it mostly involves economic development. It's heavily based on either dealing with economic development and then community recovery, meeting essential, human services needs in the community. But this is also going to take into account all the additional RSFs, including, infrastructure, environmental and cultural restoration, and those other issues as well. But it will be an all hazard plan. That said, recovery becomes much more of a substantial challenge that you need to plan for the bigger types of events like the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake.
Our the types of groups that we work with is totally dependent on the project, and this is an example of a project where I think we're doing work in a way that we haven't done so before. So with this one, are you expanding to work with those economic development kinds of agencies in the jurisdictions? For like City of Portland, that would be Prosper Portland, but I don't know what they're called in everybody else's jurisdictions.
Yeah, and yeah, definitely, the challenge with recovery planning is it does bring in a set of stakeholders who we're not used to working with, or may not have a relationship with. Again, in the economic development world, I can, just speaking for Washington County, and I know that I didn't know our economic development community 8 months ago, but I now we now do know our economic development community in Washington County a lot better, and they're also working together currently. And then I think also in the RDPO project, we also, the regional recovery framework project, we also identified, at least got started down the path by identifying other stakeholders that will be involved in recovery planning as well.
Awesome. Any other questions for John? Okay, well, thank you very much, John, for making time to be here and presenting to us. I think that brings us to the end of our agenda. But we have just a little bit of time left. Denise, is there anything else we need to cover?
No, I just want to say thanks to everybody. I got to leave, but wonderful job, everybody. Great facilitation, Katie. And thanks, Beth, for all your great work behind the scenes.
Yeah, thank you, Beth, for helping us prepare for this as we were all running around doing lots of things. And thanks everybody for your time today and for your thoughtfulness, reading through the project concepts and submitting feedback. It's much appreciated. I think we'll call it there, let people go.
Thanks, everyone.
Great to see you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.